this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. That's wrong, isn't it? I'm sure that's had something in it. But more important at the moment, I want to do a couple of mounts. Let's move that out of the way so I know what's going to happen. This plant has fallen over and out of its pot quite a few times already since I got it. And the reason is, it's got hardly any media in there. It's just balanced on the top of it, basically. I'm hoping it's one plant. I do believe it's two. Just looking at the way the bulbs are, you've got seedling bulbs here gradually getting larger up to what we've got now. Let me just, I need a wet thumb. The reason for this. I think I'm okay. That did look remarkably like traces of spider mite, but I think it's just dust basically. It's just a dusty plant. The trouble is there's two types of spider mite. The red spider mite, which everybody knows, and if you've got that on a leaf and you just wet your thumb and rub firmly but without crushing the leaf, and then look at your thumb, you'll have a rusty coloured stain on your thumb if you've got red spider mite. But obviously the others aren't red, so that doesn't work. I think that is two plants. If I separate it, well, actually it's going on a mount. It can stay as a single entity. It's not a single plant, I'm sure it's two. And that's Dendrobium Lucky Girl crossed with Corene Petite. Let's see if I can get that so as you can read it. Yeah. So that's that one. This was a gift, came in a box. These roots are very dry. The few in the middle are actually dead. That's probably where there was a sphagnum plug at some time, but that is on the oldest part of the plant. But nonetheless, with some hydration, this isn't a bad root system at all. But they're dry, and where they weren't in the pot properly, they've got even drier, despite watering frequently. So we'll get that one on a mount. I don't normally mount nobile types, which this is, but either this is a very young plant and it still hasn't reached its full size, or it's a compact one. And looking at the way the leaves are very close together with quite short elements of stem between the leaves, it could be a more compact version. So that's one. And then what's going to happen here, I really don't know, but this is staying too wet. It is a cloud forest type dendrobium, but in this environment it's staying too wet. We do have some good roots in here. Now I'm pleased. I was expecting to find next to none. When this was planted, it had a very, very poor, almost non-existent root system. And the way it was planted was I put some very small bark and some chopped up sphagnum moss in the bottom of a tray with loads of holes in for drainage, and then put some live moss on the top. This is a strange one. In the wild, this has only ever been found growing in live moss in it, yeah, like on the branch. No live moss, no plant, yeah. So it's obviously important to it. But what we do have are some nice little roots here. I think the original ones are these ones that don't look so good. And since then it's grown some roots. Very fleshy looking roots, quite honestly. So I've got something to work with. That's all I was after. So that, I need a nice tiny little mount for that one. It doesn't need much to hang on to at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this live moss to mount it on, but I need it thicker, and of course that might sound like, what's the point of taking it out of the live moss and putting it straight back in the live moss? The difference is that bark and moss in the bottom of there was staying wet. Yeah. Once this gets on a mount, it will be dry in a day, which means I can give it a really good soak, knowing it's going to dry quickly. So I'm just getting the rest of the bark out of the bottom of this moss and the older bits of the moss out, which should leave me live moss basically, and a reasonable chunk to actually mount the plant on. Now don't forget, the way this was potted, the live moss was on top of the roots. This time the live moss will be on top of the roots, but it can attach to the bark underneath. And what I will do is put a very, very small amount of live moss under the roots this time. It's live moss, yeah? So I should never have to take the moss off because it's broken down. Right, so we've got some live moss here. I'll get some of the other type of moss for that one. And we'll have a clear up and we'll come back. I'll need to find some mounts as well, come to think of it. Oh, God, that's going to be a problem. It's raining outside. I'll sort something out. I'll be back. Okay, let's get these done. I've just realised what the time is. It's nearly 5:30. It's tea time! I shouldn't be messing with orchids. I should be getting my tea. Anyway, these are not going to take long. So as I said, I'm going to put a very, very thin layer of moss on the bark first. Now this is a coarse moss. I would prefer a much finer moss, but I need to go out and collect some. This is all I've got, or I use the dead stuff, which this latest batch of so-called dead stuff does seem to be coming back to life. So I think we do have a batch of genuine zombie moss. Right. This naturally lends itself to going along the mount like that, but I will have to twist the roots slightly to make sure they sit in something. Now I'm quite happy for them to grow over the mount, and this is a tiny little mount, but if this plant takes off and develops, then this tiny little mount can be strapped onto a larger one. It's not a big deal. I think I'm going to have to get some ties going on the grounds. I need to secure something to give me a hand free to be able to put the rest of the moss on, and I'm going to have to go around quite a few times, but it's only a tiny little mount, so I don't need yards and yards of the stuff. Sorry, meters and meters. Let's keep up to date here, Roger. Yeah, we sorted a couple of problems out, that being one of them. Don't like empty glasses. Now that should be my glass of wine to go with my tea, but as tea's on hold at the moment, we'll start early. Oh. Right. Now if I can just secure what I've got so far with the loop, which should have gone on first. I know you're all going to moan. Put your tie on first, then it won't all fall off. But we're in a position where I've got a tiny little mount and my hand goes over the whole mount, so it's not so much of a big deal this time. Okay, right, now we can go round this top part a couple of times, and that's got some roots, so that's part of the plant secure, and a fair bit of the moss. Now what I don't want to do is leave bare bits of roots, so that's why I wanted to get the tie on. So I can now hold that and get a little bit of moss, bit at a time, around the base of that part of the plant, and then secure it. So that's that part of the plant done. Now we need to come around the sides here. So I keep forgetting to worry about the camera. This is a little bit fiddly obviously because it's small. Get some there, and that piece there, and then go round a couple of times and see what we've got. This is the bit where it starts getting more difficult because obviously I don't want to actually go round and cut the plant in half, so I'm having to go either side of it. How are we doing? Not doing bad. Right, that's most of the plant sorted. The bottom and everything else. What I have got is a fair bit of the plant sort of sticking slightly proud of the mount, and I've got very little moss left. So the tiny little bit I've got left I just want to tuck in there. Have I got any bare roots? No. I think that's okay. So we'll just come back round. I'm going to unthread one loop so that I've got enough to come back round that bit once more, just to get that last bit of moss. Otherwise I'm going to run out of tie and I can't be bothered to go and do another one. Have I got enough left to tie? Yes, just. You could say that was good planning, but it was more luck. Oh, come on, get in there. It's the trouble when things are small. They become fiddly when you've got, I wouldn't say clumsy hands, but so I just need to hook that. My loose end has managed to get wrapped around. I'm just going to hook that out with the scissors so that I can tie, and then we'll see what we've got. It's a bit shooting in the dark when things are this small and fiddly, but that should be okay. Right. We certainly didn't waste much fishing line, did we? All these scissors need sharpening. Right, so how does that look then? Yeah, I think we've got enough moss around the base. All the roots that I've got are covered. I can see some new roots, I think, or possibly new growth starting, but they're very close to the moss. They'll get straight in that moss. Yep, I like the look of that a lot better than I did in that tray. And as I said, if this does take off and really start to grow, then this tiny little mound can just be placed on a bigger one and some more moss spread round. So that's that little one done. That's the Dendrobium cuthbertsonii. Quite variable those are. I've seen them running from, you know, almost white with pink tinges through to deep reds. And many of those have not got a variety name, you know, like a hybrid idea or anything like that. So it appears to me it's a very variable one. Right, big mount, or bigger mount. Yeah, I don't like that sawn off bit, but I can't be bothered to take that corner off, because then I'll have a pointy bit and it gets fiddly. It's not worth the hassle. The plant's going to cover it up anyway. But we'll make a hole for a bit of wire. Oh, hang on, I'm going to need my other screwdriver. Because I've got a larger piece of wire for this one. So make a pilot hole. That's just a sharpened screwdriver. No good for doing screws up, but very good for cutting a pilot hole. And then the crosshead screwdriver with a twist cuts through that pilot hole and makes a much larger hole. Takes the wood with it. God, this is a very hard piece of bark. Needs a bit of pressure. There you go. So it cuts its hole through as it goes. So that should now be. God, that is a firm piece. That should now be plenty big enough. It's a good chunky bit of wire, isn't it? Just an odd piece that was cut off at some point from something and then just popped in the drawer. In my junk drawer. I have a junk drawer, a man drawer, but you know, man stuff's in there. You know. So I was just thinking of a comedian on about the man drawer, you know, where you have the radiator bleed valve and keys for locks you had in houses three houses ago that you've never got rid of. Oh no, I can't throw that away. You never know what it'll fit. Silly things like that. Well, at least I haven't got a man cave. Well, I suppose I have actually. It's the grow room, isn't it? Right, I'll leave that alone because I don't know where the plant's going to go. I think this will be the first mounted nobile. Now, although this looks like two plants, what it definitely is a plant heading off in two directions. So there's got to be a front and a back. And if you come around this side, there's two new growths here. They are still growing. Yeah, so those are new growths, not immature young growths, if you see what I mean. All the other growths on here have got terminal leaves. So those are the two new ones. There's another little one up in there actually. But those are my two new growths. So those would do better at the front of the plant rather than at the back. And this time we will put our tie on first. And this is quite a wide mount relatively, and I'll need to go round a few times. One of the turns will probably have to go round a cane to hold it upright, so I need to make sure I've got plenty. Because there's nothing worse than something that's on a mount that wobbles every time you handle it. It just wobbles. It's not going to let the roots settle. Now obviously the roots I've got are not going to attach. It's very rare for existing roots to attach unless they still have actively growing tips, in which case the extension of those roots may well attach, because that part of the root becomes a new root which is then capable of attaching. But under normal circumstances, roots that are older, the part that isn't actively growing will not attach to a mount, it will just hang. Right, now let's see what we can do. Plant. I think quite honestly I need to get the plant secured and then put the moss on, because it is quite a tall plant relative to the mount size. So we'll go round the roots once, just to hold the plant in place, then we'll put some moss on. I was going to say I'll hold that with my teeth, put the pliers on it, I'll hold it still, and then we'll get some moss on. Now when I was dunking this moss and pressing it down into the water, there was a spiky element stuck in my finger and I couldn't find the thorn. Gorse, they're gorse thorns basically on this type of stuff. Now I don't want this too covered. It's not an oncidium, it is a dendrobium, so I don't want to be too heavy on the moss. Just want enough to cover the roots so that it will hydrate nicely. And I don't mind if a few roots hang out and end up, you know, not in the moss. It's the new roots I'm after, quite honestly, not the roots I've already got. They are merely there to keep the plant alive until such time as it grows some new roots, which at the moment it's not doing on those two new growths, but I suspect it will soon, shortly. So now all we're doing is securing the moss, which doesn't need a stupid amount of turns, quite honestly. It'll take 3 to do that. There we go. How secure is the plant? Is it going to lean forward? Yes it is, right. So I do need to get up round the top and grab a cane. Now, which is a good one to pick? That little one won't do it, will it? It's going to have to be that big one. So I'm going to push that little growth to the other side of the larger cane, so that the larger cane can be held back against the mount without pinching that other little growth. I mean, that little growth that I'm messing with has it has actually finished growing, so it's not going to get any bigger, but I'd rather grab hold of a sturdy cane. In fact, I'll grab both of them. It's not the end of the world, but I don't want to pinch leaves. I just want to grab a cane reasonably high up to stop that wobbling. Should do it, and then we'll just come round once again at the base of the cane. How good is that now? This is still a bit wobbly, this cane, but that's the largest one. If I'm going to get any blooms on here, that's the one that's probably going to bloom. That is quite secure now. Right, that's good. So all we've got to do now is tie off. Where's my end? There it is. And I've explained this many times before, but if you start with a slip knot and then do a turn, you leave a V. You leave a V shape where you did your first turn. And that's an ideal place to tuck your final end through and pull against. I missed it. Come on, get a grip. I went over the top instead of underneath. Has that got it? Yeah, it's got it this time. Right, and then it pulls against the V. That's twice. What am I doing? Alright, we'll go that way then. You will get hooked, whether you like it or not. Getting in a right mess here now. What's going on? What am I doing wrong? Come on. Done this so many times before, it does not go wrong. Is that underneath this time? Yes. Must be. Surely it must be. Yeah, that's got it. And then it pulls back against the original knot. And then with your loose end, which is part of the original knot, you can just tie. And if you've been ultra careful with your windings and they've ended up a little bit loose, what you can also do is take your long end right round the lot. So you can go in there, right down to the bottom, and back up to where your knot is, and pull the whole lot tight. You see how it's pulling? Yeah? Now what I've done is just tightened up the original ties. Yeah? Just, you know, I mean, you do go careful when you're winding round, but sometimes you go a bit too careful and you end up with your windings a little bit slack. That just pulls them all tight, or tighter. You don't want any ties cutting into canes or garrotting roots. So there we go, that's that one. And the little one here. I mean, obviously that's going to hang that way. And the bloom's still up the right way. That was more luck than judgment. And my job now is to keep that moss alive. So that needs to be, certainly this time of year, daily watering, even if the rest of my mounts don't get watered that day. The object is to keep that moss alive. And if I go 2 or 3 days without watering that, might not do the plant any harm, but it could kill the moss. And I don't want that, those roots in dead moss. I want them in live moss. So that's those 2 done. That's 2 off my list. The list is getting smaller. I've still got some pots to repot, but I think we're down to sort of less than 10 from 40 odd. So the bulk of it's now done. My repotting is not far off finished, and there's nothing left that's an emergency, nothing that's urgent. So I can get round to those as and when I feel like it, or as and when they get to an appropriate time, like I see some new roots coming out. So that's those 2 done. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.